Good morning, everybody. Today we are here with another edition of our podcast. This is Carrie Getz with Strategicom, and we are interviewing today Amanda Trumble from ABB. She's been a good friend of mine in the industry and is doing a lot to also support women in the industry. So welcome, Amanda. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey, good morning, Carrie. Thank you so much for having me. So I've been in the data center industry for 13 years now, officially 13 years on December 11th. I work for ABB, which is a technology leader who works closely with utilities, transportation. They're big into e-mobility right now. Overall infrastructure customers, and then specifically for my role, data center customers. So ABB consists of 5 business units. They're broken out by electrification, which would be kind of like the substation to socket perspective. We have an industrial automation group, controls and digital solutions, since everything is going to the digitized era, as you well know. Motion, which is drives and motors, and then robotics and discrete automation, which is kind of the factory automation. And we have various robots at some of our events that are doing anything from spinning a disc and performing as a DJ to pouring coffee. It's pretty amazing what they can do to get them to mimic the human motion. And then lastly, our power grids or our power generation division. My role is kind of understanding the design needs and timelines of co-location providers for either expansion or greenfield builds that they're having specific to the central region. I'm based in Madison, Wisconsin. And then pairing those solutions to provide optimal efficiencies.
Perfect. So power is not something that most young girls think about going into. I'd be curious to know what led you to this path and how did you end up in this role?
That's always my favorite question to ask anyone in this industry too, because you don't start off by saying I'm going to go work for data centers. It's usually something out of facilities, IT, or the like. And the way that I got into the role, I actually worked for an insurance company, and one of my customers worked for a service company that serviced uninterruptible power supply and batteries. So they were on the UPS and battery maintenance side of things. And so December of 2006, I took a role with a service organization, and they were brand agnostic, but it really took me into a whole new world that I didn't know existed, specifically data centers. And then that led to an acquisition of that organization by Thomas & Betts in 2010, which ABB acquired Thomas & Betts in 2012, and that was when we got integrated into the ABB family. So transitioning from the service side to the product side has been somewhat natural. We on the service end, when life cycles were up and or equipment had just failed and folks were looking to make last minute replacements, we would spec the replacement, just make sure that everything would fit from a retrofit perspective. And so it's kind of a natural transition to going to the product side, except at a much larger, higher, bigger voltage, bigger power, so to speak, coming off of the grid, obviously.
It's a really fascinating industry, and data centers, we've talked in other podcasts about kind of the 3 magic things or the holy trinity if you do any Cajun cooking, which is onions, celery, and peppers. But kind of the holy trinity for the data center industry is power, cooling, and compute, power being a big chunk of that. And I know one of the women that I was on a panel with a while back, she's an electrical engineer. And the reason she got into it was because her dad said, hey, look, there's a whole bunch of old guys that are about to retire as electrical engineers, and you'll have a great career doing that. But obviously, there's ways to get into power, like you said, without necessarily having that EE degree through a different avenue. And
transferable skills is something that doesn't get spoken about enough, or that maybe we just don't recognize. Perfect example. So one of my girlfriends, since elementary school, she went to be an interior designer. And she had all the traits of project management. We used to carpool together, and I would hear her explain the way that she would approach a project, or the way that she was engaging with the customer. And I said, you should consider coming over and maybe looking into a project management role for the critical power side, or just like a bid manager, essentially, because she was very detail oriented and always ahead of timelines, and just a really good fit from an overall, the way that she works, picture. And I remember when it was her second day at work, she was bawling her eyes out saying, what did you have me do? What am I doing? I don't know what any of this means. And now, 9 years later, she's still in that same role, an extremely successful asset to the organization. And she went to school for interior design. So I think you're absolutely right. We need to pay attention that what we're doing specific to the product or the service, it can always apply to other avenues and other industries.
Yeah, we talked to Lee Kirby some about veterans coming back from the military and how they have very parallel skills, and how a lot of those actually can combine into, different things we do in the industry. And, trying to fill this industry with people that have data center curriculums, or, even IT curriculum, there's a lot of colleges that don't offer that, or don't offer the right skills, because the industry has changed so fast. The curriculum hasn't been able to keep up. And, looking outside the box for companies that are trying to fill these positions, I think is really important. And they're going to have to train you anyway. I mean, you're going to have to learn the product. You're going to have to learn what it does. You're going to have to learn the customer needs. And all of that is really on the job training. There's no college class that's going to teach you how to go sit down and talk to a customer about this particular product set.
Absolutely. They should want to have that level of training, because everyone's culture is different and unique. And the culture is what's going to keep that employee interested and bring them, give them the value for why they want to be with this particular organization. And then they will express that value in their day-to-day once they kind of get their arms around what the main goal is and what's important to who they're working for.
We're back in that. Of course, this is a really cyclical industry anyway, but we are kind of back in that cycle. When I started in this industry, if you worked someplace for more than about 3 years, people wanted to know what the heck was wrong with you. That is one complaint that a lot of employers have now, is trying to keep employees engaged and at work, because retraining or having to rehire and backfill a position is way more expensive than probably what it costs to keep that employee in the first place. I think I read a study that said something about, keeping an employee might cost you $20,000 a year, but retraining and rehiring for a new person is about $150,000 a year on average.
Plus and I don't know how they formulate those numbers, but there's just so much intellectual property that leaves when you have a skilled asset that's no longer with the organization. They need to recognize that a lot of times things fall on plates where maybe they shouldn't have, and people are picking up those duties silently sometimes, because there's that old adage that I'm so good at my job, they give me more work to do. And the more work that's falling on their plates, management might not always be able to have visibility into that until it's no longer there.
The attrition rate for women in this industry as a whole is about 67%, which is pretty abysmal anyway. And, I know that you and I are both active in WIMCO, which puts a lot of women together with a lot of other women for support and networking, these type of conversations, really, to be quite honest. And I think all of this sort of helps because, to your point, caregiver roles traditionally fall on women, right, wrong, indifferent, or whatever your situation is. That's just the way it is. And when you have little ones at home, you have to really have some type of work-life balance. And, sometimes it's difficult to go home and talk to your spouse and complain about your day, or because they may not have any kind of frame of reference. So I think some of those organizations are important. And I know you're starting a WIMCO chapter up there for the Great Lakes region. Why don't you tell me a little bit about kind of the target area that you're going for? We'll talk a little bit about WIMCO, and maybe you can share with us what you really hope to get out of your WIMCO chapter up there.
Yeah, absolutely. The chapter for 2020 is rolling out nicely. We're going to do quarterly WIMCO workshops. Some ideas for the year are Habitat for Humanity build, and we're targeting construction management degrees or students currently. Naturally, there's a shortage of women, but I just keep expanding my region that I'm looking into to find folks to help us with that build day. Women in Tech Wellness Day, which that'll kind of be like, that's how we'll round out the year, actually, more on the social end. But the rest of the workshops do have that feeling of a tangible offering, and that you're getting something out of that day specifically. We're going to do a data center training day with Confluence. So they have a curriculum around, some level of accreditation for data center specific training. And then the initial event is going to just be a mock interview, which I think is going to be interesting, fun, and rewarding on both ends. So we like to have 5 executives interviewing 10 to 12 students, and to treat it like a real job interview, dress for success. We'll have a list of questions and just some real high-level role playing. And I've heard from other folks that have done similar exercises that real jobs have actually come out of those instances. So I'm really excited for the mock interview day. And to kind of back up a little bit and give more history on the program, you, of course, were the first mentee mentor program that I worked with within the chapter. And I greatly appreciate your time, because of you, we were able to award our first chapter scholarship earlier this year. And Carly was our recipient.
Oh, yay.
Carly was our recipient, and she was your mentee. And it was just a feel-good success story. So she fell into my lap, and we had to do something about getting her plugged into data centers, and she was already kind of had a mind for STEM, thankfully, and then just advocating for the data center side of the house, which you did a fantastic job of. And I can't speak enough about the National Mentor Mentee program, because it opened a lot of doors and gave me a lot of visibility into how helpful the program is and what the end result can be.
People sort of forget that there are a lot of those programs. 7x24 has one, AFCOM has one, Bixie has one. I participate in all of those. And, even LinkedIn groups, if you just really want somebody to vet or talk to, there's a ton of women that are really out there willing to help, eager to help, because we certainly want to see a balance in this industry. In a lot of the women's panels that I've been on, surprisingly enough, some of the biggest advocates and the most active participants are fathers of daughters who want more options for their daughters moving forward. And so I would encourage everybody out there listening to sort of look up some of these organizations. And there's obviously links to these under the podcast as well. But WIMCO is through 7x24. There's a Women in Data Center group that I run on LinkedIn. And there's certainly lots of other groups out there as well. But a lot of those have scholarships. Infrastructure Masons has scholarships that are available. And these are sort of off the beaten path kind of scholarships. And they are directed towards data center curriculum. But we know as an industry, we are so far behind where we need to be having data center curriculum in all the areas of the U.S. And so companies are really looking to do more skills-based hiring than necessarily having a degree that ticks the box, because there just aren't enough degrees that tick the box. And so that's part of the reason for this series is, really bolstering women and veterans and trades in the data center industry, because if it weren't for trades, none of us would have a job anyway. Nothing would be built. I think there's lots of avenues for women now that didn't exist probably even 5-10 years ago, or at least not with the amount of support. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely. And spending time with I spent time with some of the engineering firms in Chicago this summer with the women that they were either in full-on employees or in internship roles there. And I was very impressed actually with the regionalized focus through ASHRAE and through Society of Women Engineers, that they were they were all plugged in to both organizations, and still continued to stay in touch with the programs that they had available to them. So I'm sure it's different in every pocket, but this specifically for Chicago, they definitely are reaching out and recognizing that it's a problem, and trying to get them plugged in for these internship programs. And part of the WIMCO effort is to supplement or complement the existing working organizations that they have, instead of trying to reinvent the wheel. We're just going to add on data centers as another avenue within the STEM community to give some visibility into our industry.
In some cases, it's difficult because some of these organizations have membership fees and not everybody has tons of membership fees to float around. And so I would encourage everybody, if you're considering different organizations, you're going to have some that are way more active in certain pockets of the country than you are in other pockets of the country. And reaching out to other women that are in those organizations and find out how active they are, what's available to you, and kind of what might fit is going to help you decide which of those organizations get your membership dollars. And some of them are really more about training and certifications, which I think it is an amazing path into the industry. Certifications go a long way to be very detailed and specific training, as opposed to a degree where you might learn about things that aren't really relevant. Although, it's always good to learn, don't get me wrong, and I'm certainly not bashing degrees, but a lot of these organizations give scholarships towards those certifications just to kind of kickstart a career. And if you start in one role in this industry, there's certainly many others that you can jump to. Just listening to you, Amanda, if you decided that you weren't particularly crazy about what you're doing in ABB, there's lots of other places you could go.
The opportunities are really endless. Even though it's such a small community, there's so many different facets of customer engagement, or it really is whatever you make it. It's a unique role from the perspective that every day is different. There's never a dull moment. I'm lucky to have the flexibility of my specific duties in my role, and then the support of ABB as the organization to understand that there has to be a level of flexibility to find balance and to have it make sense overall. Because like today, for example, I'm spending a lot of time focusing on the 2020 roadmaps of some of these co-location providers to try to take back to the factory and stay on top of lead times. Speed to market is everything in this space, and because of its criticality, they're always going to be, on our end, they're always going to be asking for forecasting models, and forecasting can be extremely difficult for them. So working with the customers on roadmaps for their potential expansion and new builds to assist our supply chain, that's taking it to a whole new level outside of the data center space and actually understanding like factory optimization and supply chain. So there's all sorts of avenues you can touch on from this industry. Absolutely.
Logistics is a huge part too. If a hyperscaler jumps in and builds a giant hyperscale data center. So for those of you that don't know what hyperscale is, it is a massive amount of compute. So they consume a lot of energy. These would be like the Googles, the Facebooks, and but when they build, they require a ton of product. Being able to understand that forecasting and, where these customers are planning to build is huge, because it can potentially shut down the supply chain to the rest of your customers if you don't forecast those correctly.
Absolutely. Yes.
In your role, I think that's a big part of that, right? So you're not just on the technical side, but you're an advocate to the end user and an advocate to the company to make sure that marriage sort of goes without a hitch.
Oh, yeah, 100%. That's what makes it so unique. There's give and take on both ends, but you really need to advocate to make sure that something the factory has seen for the past 15 years, the model and the lead times that the customers that they were selling into were accepting, is not the same case for the specific industry. You have to have a different approach to supply chain, and you have to somewhat meet the end user's expectation on how to deliver and how to take the lead time risk out of their offering, because they, as you said, can get a hyperscaler or an anchor tenant on board and look to be up and running for that specific anchor tenant in 9 months. And that's a miracle to some people, but that's their day-to-day business in this specific industry or with these specific customers. So, yeah.
Yeah, this industry is growing so fast. Just the compute needs of the colo market that you're focused on is massive for everything. Power, cooling, compute, networking, the lines that come into the building itself to supply the backhaul connections, and all the way out to edge compute and what's really expected to be literally in every city, everywhere, in multiple locations. Although I think at some point some of that will consolidate into some smaller colos in those cities. But there's definitely no shortage of work. I mean, it's not going away at any time soon. So if somebody is looking for a career, even if you're thinking 4 years out, it's definitely a good choice, I would think, from a career standpoint.
It's been a wonderful ride thus far, and I still feel like it's in its infancy, even though it's maturing, but it still continues to change, and we don't understand the capabilities that 5G holds for us. And as far as I know, there's only a handful of actual 5G towers in the US at this moment. So the money or the investment has been made, and they're going to be going up in strides. And then we'll see where their data is going to go and what we're going to actually be able to do with this new technology.
Which, 5G, for those that have been under a rock, haven't heard what it is.
When someone says
it's
5G,
actually
take a shot. No, yeah.
Yeah, right. The 5G obviously is the next speed for cellular towers, but it's also expected to hit a lot of areas that are covered by cell, but not necessarily covered by particularly good internet lines. And that's really kind of, I think, where the crux is. And this is for streaming and some of those other services to be available in areas where people just haven't had a good high-speed internet option. And of course, there was this guy, Parkinson's, he had two laws, one for bandwidth and one for networking. And basically what they say is if you put it out there, they're going to fill it up. So to me, I think 5G is the next stepping stone. I don't think it's going to be the end of where we go from a progression standpoint, but we'll certainly end up with more towers because we'll be making services available to more and more people.
Yeah, and the gaming as a service industry or any other service, Disney Plus, so on and so forth, they're all going to require huge data centers going forward, and it's interesting to see if they will have them in-house or if they will go to a provider or how they're going to manage it all. Because, for example, in my region, Iowa is just out of control right now with builds because of cheap power and tax incentives, and everyone's trying to mirror the Northern Virginia approach to get to a point where you're referenced as Data Center Alley. But the expansion there's no end in sight. The customers continue to buy land, and they continue to have land ready and available next to their existing sites for when the enterprise or the hyperscale users decide that they don't want to build or that they can't build as fast as needed.
Some of the people that started in colo are now building their own data centers, or some of the people that started 100% in cloud, which is basically using all of somebody else's stuff for your compute needs, have realized that those bills are getting out of hand and they're now building locally. And I think it's important for everybody to understand that data centers are not just in Dallas and Virginia and San Jose. They're literally in every city that you go. And if you're in any commercial part of a city, I can promise you're looking at a data center, whether you realize it or not, when you're looking at a building. And that's just going to continue to grow literally everywhere. And this is probably one of the few industries outside of maybe medical and mortuary services that will be in every single city in some shape, form, or fashion within the next 10 years. So you can really kind of write your ticket. Now, certainly there are some cities that have bigger pockets and bigger concentrations than others, but they're everywhere. And IT as a whole is a great career to get into for that reason. That's part of the reason I love it, is because it always changes. There's always something new. It's not at all stagnant. If you work, keep your skills up, you can go anywhere.
Absolutely. That's so true. And being with one of these providers, you mentioned most major cities, you mentioned anywhere in the country, and the majority of these providers are in, they have sites, they have locations in all of those areas. So even if you wanted to stay with the same organization or, flip-flop within the industry, you can really do it all with data centers. It's a very unique opportunity.
And that's really important because we all have lives, right? At the end of the day, we should be working to live. And sometimes your spouse might get transferred, or you might find a different location that you'd rather live, something like that. It definitely provides that avenue without having to jump careers or change careers. And it also gives you the opportunity to sort of shop to find a work-life balance. And I know, Amanda, you've got a little one at the house. Being a mom of a little one and trying to organize things sometimes can be a bit hectic. But I think it's also important for people to understand that if you work with the right company, they give you lots of resources to help you. It's not, they don't stick you out in Siberia and say, here, figure it out.
No, they're at a level where they recognize the time you put in and the effort that you give is driven by who you're doing it for. So when family becomes the number one driver and why you're doing what you're doing, they want to make sure that it still makes sense at the end of the day, and that you're finding that layer. We just had an announcement come out about a new vacation policy that they're trying for 2020. And it's supposed to be kind of like a contemporary approach to both secure new talent and then keep the existing talent that we currently have. So they're taking a permissible vacation policy. I'm sorry for taking vacation. Oh man, that's so true. No,
That has been in my past, trust me.
So it's just a unique look on instead of starting off someone or trying to capture someone who doesn't want to lose their 4 weeks that they've built up and accrued with whatever company A is, they can come to our organization and on day one basically be at will to ask their manager for approval for the time off they feel is necessary for their particular situation. And it's just granted, and it's kind of a very unique and very exciting way to hope that we get some of that new talent, and to understand that they are looking out for the folks that have, single moms with 4 kids that use all their vacation time on their kids' sick days and don't actually get the mental health days that they need to increase their performance while on the job. So it's fantastic that they're recognizing that, and they continue to hone in on different ideas and different, I don't want to say processes, but it's really changing the entire core of our hiring process and our recruiting sector too, to make sure that we're capturing the right diverse crowd of people.
Companies are getting a lot better at that, actually, which is really refreshing. In the past, I worked for companies that really discouraged you from taking a holiday, and they would pay you out of your vacation every year, which kind of became your Christmas bonus, because they really didn't want you to take vacation. Everybody gets burnt out. You've got to have like you said, a mental health day. You just need a break and need to be able to turn off work, and whether it's for yourself or somebody in your family, or just go hang on the beach. My personal favorite day.
And I've seen it's happened to me personally, where you get to wherever you're going, if you're going for an actual like destination vacation, and it takes about, I don't know, 24 hours, a full day to kind of unwind from that work mentality and let yourself maybe check out a little bit, because you're still kind of, everything's accessible. You can still see email, you can still engage. Some of us like to do that. I personally do. I like to know what's going on, and just to make sure that nobody's hair's on fire and so on and so forth. But then once you allow yourself to separate and kind of get back into some of your own headspace, that's when you will have those those moments of brilliance where all of a sudden your creativity, which has kind of been quieted for a little bit for whatever reason, because you get in the daily minutia, it sparks itself, and now you're completely refreshed, and you have all this new energy and new focus to put back into your career. And it's crazy to me that some of those moments come when you're doing nothing work related whatsoever. It's just those little, it's because you let your brain rest and gave room for maybe that other side of the brain to speak up a little bit. And I think
it's kind of like cleaning out a junk drawer.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes.
That's important for work-life balance. And, I would really encourage people that are looking for a job to talk to people in different companies and find out what their policies are. And I think we've both seen this in our careers, where there's companies that really provide lip service to a lot of things, to diversity and bringing on women talent, or even just diversity in thought, being younger people and people of diverse cultures and attitudes and gender preferences and the like. They say they do a really great job. At the end of the day, we've all known people that it just really hasn't panned out that way. And generally that's because of a bad manager. But in talking to other people and finding out what their culture is like at a particular company before you get there, that's a great way to kind of figure out if it's a good place. And I even ask people that are interviewing me that, what other questions do you have? Well, where do you see yourself in 5 years with this company? And do you see yourself with this company in 5 years? And sometimes the interviewer's like, well, nobody's ever asked me that before, but if a better job comes along, I'm leaving. And I think that speaks volumes.
I couldn't agree more. And back to the comment of actually taking a real approach and being genuine and looking out for one another. In one of our discussions, you mentioned, even though we just spoke on or touched on the mentor-mentee program, you mentioned don't necessarily find a mentor, find a sponsor, someone that's going to stick up for you when you're not around and kind of always have you on the front of mind in unique conversations that might lead to who knows what opportunities, careers, so on and so forth. And that's really stuck with me too, because in order to get there, you have to put yourself out there with that person, which you were one of the first women I met in this industry and made a real connection with. You're definitely a pioneer for us, and we need to do that. You need to do that, not necessarily pay it forward, but just kind of have that mentality as a whole in every situation, because we need to look out for each other, which sounds so cliche, but man, it's true.
It is. And thank you, by the way. But to that point, a sponsor really does kind of put you forward. You're not there. And, they'll be, if you're in sales, they'll be the people that recommend customers to you. They'll be, if the ones that if a new opportunity comes along that they think is going to fit, they'll put your name forward and really take up for you. And for companies that are really trying to get that balance of men and women or diversity or, whatever that is, one of the big problems is that 85% of jobs are filled through networking. And most of the people that recommend somebody for a job, it's who they know and who they hang out with or play golf with or whatever. And, once they try to fill that with somebody diverse, it gets to be hard because they don't really know anybody, or they look for certain job skills that they have. And really, we're just cloning people at that point, and we're not bringing diversity of thought, and we're not bringing something that's different to play.
Yeah, and it's
just always been
it is ironic. I mean, and again, it's just that idea of being heard. Someone is listening and recognizing that I belong here as well. Just like instead of men at work signs, they finally changed it to, people at work.
Yeah, all of those things are good things. And I think we're certainly moving forward and realizing that women can do a lot more than people ever thought we could. And, same thing with some of the new kids coming up and changing the way that we hire people and changing the way we look at people and trying to figure out kind of better ways to match skills to jobs. And in some cases, parallel skills that aren't really there because,
Agreed.
We got to train folks anyway. So we are about out of time. I want to thank you so much for your insight today and all the best on your WIMCO chapter. That sounds amazing. I hope that I'm looking forward to hearing about your first day and how all that turns out. I think it'll be awesome.
6 months down the road, and I can have some actual membership numbers or success stories to as a follow-up and stay tuned. So thank you, Carrie, for giving me the opportunity, and I hope to see you again soon.
For everybody else that's listening, we appreciate your time. And if you are up in the Wisconsin/Chicago region, check out the WIMCO chapter. That's WIMCO. It's part of 7x24. You can go meet Amanda in person. If you have power needs, obviously, call ABB. You can meet her there too. But we look forward to having the next podcast with you guys. And again, thank you for listening. We realize your time is valuable. So we hope you're getting something out of these. Feedback is always welcome.